So I'll get this started. So like I said, my name is Jorge Morales. I'm the director of the department, and I'm here to co-present with the equity coordination team of the department. So I'm going to start by letting them introduce themselves first. So if each one of you can start, Nikki.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Nikki Fowler. I'm the HR manager for Watershed Protection.
Hi, I'm Kelly Gagnon, an environmental program coordinator in the planning division of Watershed.
Hello, everyone. My name is Victor Nelms, and I am supervisor for pond maintenance for Field Operations Division for Watershed Protection Department.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Janna Renfro. I'm an engineer with Field Engineering Services.
And I believe Ramesh Swaminathan was kicked out, but as soon as he comes back, he'll help with the presentation as well. Ramesh is the managing engineer over the project design and delivery teams in our department. So I wanted them to introduce themselves because wanted their representation of the broader department initiative, which has many staff that participate in this process. This is an employee-led effort that started in 2018. Today's presentation, we're going to focus on giving you an overview of Watershed, what Watershed has done with this equity initiative. We will also talk about a little bit of FY22 budget and beyond, where we're going with this effort. We'll continue our equity work as a department. We are actually adding a new position that will be focused on equity inclusion programming as we move forward. This particular coordination team has been doing a lot of the work in addition to their regular duties at the department. And we'll also talk a little bit about the update to our strategic plan, which is going to have a big emphasis on community engagement. And I believe I've shared that in the past with you all. So there's a lot we could cover, but we are only providing an overview tonight, and we can return with other specific topics on equity if you wish for us, or we can provide memo updates as we move forward. So I want to start with definitions as it relates to equity. So the City of Austin has the Equity Office, and the work we do is under their guidance and their support. And they define equity with leading with race. And let me just read a little bit from our equity charter at the department just to help you get that in context in the definition as we use it at the City of Austin. So equity is the concept of fairness focused on equal outcomes for all. In the City of Austin, a person's race is the primary predictor of their quality of life. The City of Austin Equity Initiative, therefore, specifically aims to advance and achieve racial equity across all quality of life indicators. The Equity Initiative incorporates other identities such as income, gender, age, ability, and sexual orientation. However, the initiative leads with race because race continues to be the strongest predictor of outcomes in our community. So how does equity in Watershed operationalize? So in Watershed, we want to make sure we focus on the internal and external. How can quality of life outcomes related to our department missions, such as flood, erosion, and water pollution, and the work environment be predicted by your race? For example, are you more likely to experience flooding, erosion, or water pollution based on your race? Do all races and genders experience the same quality of life and have the same opportunities working in our department? Our department has a long history of environmental justice, and embedding equity in everything we do is what we strive to do. An example is the image you see in this slide is from the tank farm. Organizing for Justice was a theme that we presented with the State of the Environment 2020 annual report. And this came from the East Austin Environmental Initiative. So some of our folks in our department have been doing this for many, many years. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the team, and I'll start with Janna.
So as a team, we found a particular approach to be helpful as we worked on equity. It was presented to us by the Equity Office as a framework to use. It comes from a toolkit developed by the Government Alliance for Race and Equity, also I think a lot of times referred to as GARE. So y'all may be familiar with this framework, but I'll just take a quick minute to review it here. The approach we use is normalize, organize, operationalize. So normalize is just developing a common understanding of race and equity using a perspective of systems and history. We found this is easier said than done, obviously, because a lot of us come to this work rightfully pretty confused. And so getting a common analysis is really key to having those productive conversations. Organize means we're using our relationships in the organization and in community to build a network of gatekeepers, of decision makers, of power holders that are all working with that common analysis of race and equity. Operationalize is the step that then builds off of that common analysis and the network we build to actually use equity tools and strategies that create results. The thing is we all want to be in operationalize, right? We live in a world of performance measures. So if we can't show what we did we do anything at all? But normalize and organize is really critical work, as we've learned. And it is also hard to quantify. It's often invisible until you get to the operationalize step and you find out that you've been successful or not based on whether or not you've really done normalize and organize. So we chose this strategic approach as a format for this presentation because it feels important to show that process at work for us. And because oftentimes when we find ourselves stuck or lost or unsuccessful in an effort in equity, we can look back to this framework and really realize that either we didn't do a step fully, or we skipped a step entirely, or we need to just really cycle back through the process because it is stepwise, but it's meant to be a continual cycle that builds off of each other. So how have we normalized equity work in Watershed? Our work of Normalize is focused on using Undoing Racism from the People's Institute for Survival and beyond. The People's Institute uses several fundamental principles, and the ones that have shown up most predominantly in our work in Watershed are analyzing power, understanding gatekeeping, learning from our history, especially our environmental history, like Jorge mentioned the tank farms, identifying manifestations of racism, and networking. The process by which we normalize and apply these concepts is through the city's equity assessment tool, which the department completed in 2018. From the equity assessment tool and using these principles to apply them to our organization, we found 4 areas where we want to focus our work: data, prioritization, engagement, and internal equity. We'll talk about the first 3 later in the presentation, but the one that was continually highlighted as a driving need for our department was internal equity. So what does that mean to us? As Jorge mentioned, when we work on equity, we lead with race. So part of the equity assessment was breaking down the demographics of our department. So there are 4 bar charts on this slide. The top bar chart shows the overall racial demographics of the city of Austin. The second bar chart shows the demographics of our department as a whole.
Thanks.
So overall, comparing the first and second bar chart, we almost perfectly mirror our community demographics. However, when we choose to go a little further, we look at the bottom 2 bars, which shows the third bar, which are the demographics of our field operations division, and then the fourth bar, which is the rest of our divisions in the department. So this shows us that our office staff is disproportionately white. That's the blue on the fourth bar, compared to community and our department. And our operations and maintenance staff is predominantly people of color. So that's the yellow compared to the blue on the third bar. So equity asks us to look here to find out how distribution of power and resources might be different. So I'm going to hand it off to Victor to discuss internal equity and organizing in the field operations division.
Yes, thank you, Janna. So I want to share my experience as a worker in field operations division for Watershed Protection Department. So I was hired on as a temporary employee in 2011. And prior to that, 2 years prior to that, I had gone through some adversities. And when I got hired on with the city, I was going to report to a location on Ben White Boulevard. And at this location, there was an old building that was about the size of a little smaller than a double wide trailer. And in this building, we consist of 5 crews, and we had 6 to 7 crew members per cruise, and all the supervisors for the crews. And I think that amounted to about anywhere from 35 to 40 people in that trailer, in that building. And in that building, I recall there was only one restroom for all of us that resided there. There was one restroom, and in that one restroom, there was one toilet and one wash basin for washing up. And I can recall there was one computer for all of us crew members to use. And we had we had training once a month, and they called this training diversity. And we would meet up, and in this training, we would watch movies, eat pizza, and drink soda. And the movies that we watched, they were movies that depicted people of color who had overcame adversities due to racism. And at the end of those movies, we would have discussions and Q&A, questions and answers. And I recall distinctly one of the crew members asked the question, are we ever going to have a black supervisor? I wasn't paying too much attention to the structure at that time. I was new and I was just excited and thrilled and enthusiastic about having a new job. But one day my supervisor had me accompany him to this place to go pick up some supplies. And upon entering this place, I noticed as we was driving up, it was a big old brick building, 13 stories, if I recall correctly. And we entered this with glass windows everywhere. And when we entered this building, I went to the restroom. I noticed how clean and pristine it was. And I also noticed that there was multiple toiletries and urinals in the restrooms, and there was multiple wash basins to clean up in. And what I did notice also was that there was 2 restrooms, one for men and one for women. And there was a restroom on every floor. And we proceeded to walk through another door. And when we walked through that door, I noticed that there was these cubicles. And in these cubicles, there was individuals sitting down in these cubicles that had their own space, and every employee in there had their own computer. When we left that place, I asked my supervisor, what is this place? And he stated to me that that was the One Texas Center. And who is these people? And he stated to me that these was Watershed Protection employees. These were your coworkers. And at that time, my perception changed. I realized that the diversity meetings that I was attending before wasn't very diverse at all, because we had whole divisions at this One Texas Center who was predominantly white, while we attended this diverse meeting over here at Field Operations Division where our employees was predominantly Black, or people of color, should I say. I felt marginalized, I felt less than, and I actually felt segregated. We stayed in that building for some years, and we eventually were able to move out of that building, but not until that building was infested with asbestos. That was our only reason for being able to leave that building. The shame on us was that we had management and the executive team enter that building to address us many a time, and nobody never did anything to change the conditions of that building and the conditions that we were having to work out of daily. So our history shows that people of color have been treated unjustly for years. But I say, what does the graph say? The graph says that Watershed Protection Department or field operation, which is predominantly people of color, is almost half of our department, is what the graph says. And so we go through these kinds of adversities at work, but we go through these kinds of adversities in society at home as well. Just to name a few: police brutality, racial profiling, and not to mention gentrification. Our employees can't even afford to live in the city of Austin, and they work for the city of Austin. And when the emergencies do come, the natural disasters, the flooding, the erosions, and the storms, field operations divisions are those that are called on. And we continue to answer that call in spite of our struggles. So we struggle to organize here because of a highly racialized history and power dynamic. Yet we continue to move forward. And I want them to buy in to an equity message. So we have our equity initiative. So we've had our assessments, we've gone on and had our meetings, and we've conducted our trainings, undoing racism, groundwater analysis, through other team-based trainings. But one thing I do know, in spite of our struggles, Watershed Protection Department work well together and coordinate well together and come together as a team when called on in emergencies and in our regular duties. And that's our divisions. We have been involved in endless projects together. We have been involved in endless projects together through the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, just recently, this winter storm that came out of nowhere. Watershed protection employees come together and work together and are strong together. So I'll end with a question. How do I tell my employees to use their voice when their voice has been falling on deaf ears for years? Thank you. I'll go ahead and turn it over to my teammate, Ramesh Swaminathan. Yeah, Swaminathan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor. That was quite powerful. Real quick, my name is Ramesh Swaminathan. I'm a managing engineer with Watershed. Just to follow up with Victor, one of the things that I want to share with you is Janna spoke about how Operationalize is a key thing that everybody looks forward to. People are always concerned or wanting to know what exactly are we doing. And some of the things that happen is we grow organically, and we don't always have a process for it. But what I want to share with you today is some of the things that we have done when the opportunity has presented itself. And Victor mentioned this, that we have had a couple of emergencies lately, and these have been opportunities that we have tried to put the things that we've learned and what we have tried to use, like what we've been talking about and how we can do the equity analysis to put it to work. On the slide in front of you, you see a map on the left side, and that's actually the map of City of Austin. But if you see the different colors, what we tried to do is, this is during the winter storm event. And one of the tools we have used in our equity analysis is a data set called the Social Vulnerability Index. It's a data set that the Center for Disease Control publishes, and it really looks at things such as social vulnerability, as the name states, but it really looks at like 15 different things that impact communities of marginalized communities, and some of the things that they are the ones that are usually the most impacted when an emergency such as a pandemic or a winter storm occurs. And an example of this particular thing in winter storm was the equity office was actually unable to come to the EOC because of the icy conditions, and they were not able to drive, but we were able to do it. Watershed was able to do it. And what we did was we used our relationships with the equity office to right away start doing some of the equity work, because it gave us an opportunity. You know, a good friend Kelly Coleman often says it's not about what we do, but how we do it. And this is one of the examples of how we did it. We looked at the Social Vulnerability Index, mapped it on the City of Austin, and we made sure that we locate our water pods, that was the distribution centers, that are in close access to the places where the water is needed most. And then the other thing we did was, right at the command level, we spoke to the equity office. We identified a whole list of nonprofits that were serving each of these very subset communities that are not fully served. And I know there are many things about the winter storm that the city could do better, different. But I can tell you that this is one of the things that actually we did very well. And we were able to partner with so many agencies to provide water, not just with the nonprofits, but right there at the EOC, we worked with, say, for example, Cap Metro. They have a metro transit program which they use to provide access to people with disabilities. Because we were able to do this work, we were able to partner with them. So when they went to check on the people with disabilities, we were also able to deliver water, not only to them, but also people who live near them. That's just one of the examples of what we did. And moving forward, what we're trying to do is create this equity mindset. Jorge speaks about it all the time at Watershed. We lead with equity. And this is an example of what we do everywhere we go. And I want to share that this is kind of the work we do practically on a daily basis on everything we do, not just when it comes for an emergency, but also the work we try to do in terms of capital project delivery, in-house design, and all of the things. So I want to stop talking right now, because I want to share let Nikki Fowler, HR manager, speak about some of the more formal things that we are doing. So maybe Nikki, if you can start.
Thank you, Ramesh, for that. So some of the hiring practice, some of the things that we're doing within Watershed to keep the equity, as Ramesh mentioned, that our director has told us to lead with equity as well as empathy. So some of the things that we're working on is improving our hiring practices, making sure that we include a diverse panel, making sure that our diverse panel is also a mirror of the city of Austin, and making sure that we have clear representation of exactly what our city of Austin look like. If you could please change the slide for me. We are partnering with several different organizations within the community to make sure that we're reaching out to them and casting a wider net to include a diverse pool of applicants, to make sure that we get the best applicant possible to fill our vacancies within our department. Another thing that we've also done is we've included, our director has made sure that the entire leadership team, including our executives, our managers, senior level managers, as well as our front end managers, also participate in undoing racism training, as well as groundwater analysis. And to date, we have had all of our leadership complete the training, as well as 55 employees. And that also includes senior level management, as well as employees that have gone through these types of training. This is a very sensitive subject with us, and one that we take very kind to heart. In addition to hiring, the city of Austin has an initiative to promote a fair chance hiring. And so we want to make sure, like I said, that our workforce mirrors the community at all times. And because we've gone through this training with our leadership, we're able to open up healthy conversations, as Victor can be a testament to. He actually created having tailgate meetings with our field operations staff, so we can talk about what are some of the equity concerns. And with that, we hear their voice, they bring their concerns back to the leadership team, and we're able to make changes. Changes don't come overnight, as we know. They are slowly being integrated with our department, but we are headed, we're committed to this, and we are moving forward. One thing that we're also look forward to is with our FY22 new positions, we're going to have an equity inclusion manager position that's going to be available to take this initiative full speed and run with it and go forward. At this point, I will turn it over to Kelly.
Thank you, Nikki. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Gagnon. I work in the planning division of the department. And so tonight I'll be talking about the final part of this normalize, organize, operationalize strategy, which is repeating that cycle, or as we show on the slide, listen, learn, and repeat. As Janna mentioned earlier, we see this component as foundational to the success of each of the other parts, because it reminds us that we are always accountable to the communities that we serve, both internally and externally. So as we have these conversations and normalize these discussions within our organization, as we build networks and organize around a defined understanding of equity, and ultimately change how we do our work informally and formally, we need to ensure that we're checking in with those we're accountable to, ensuring we're on the right path, and continually informing and improving our processes. So to do this, the Equity Office has provided us with that equity assessment toolkit that Janna described earlier, which is an exercise that we'll continue to do as a department every few years. And those results are actually posted for the public. You can see it on the Equity Office's Equity Action Team dashboard. You can visit that page today. There's actually a link on the bottom right of that slide, just a little hard to memorize. So you can Google City of Austin Equity Action Team dashboard, and you can see the information about our department's equity assessment and all of the other city departments who have participated in the initiative. We did want to highlight one of the graphics on this dashboard, which is the one that we put here on the slide, showing the results to a subset of questions to the Listening to the Workforce survey. City of Austin staff complete the survey annually, and it now includes questions related specifically to racial equity. So staff are asked to answer for their department, is it valuable to discuss impacts of race? Does leadership support discussions of race? Is the department committed to racial equity? Has the department taken steps to reduce racial inequity? And are you comfortable talking about race in your workplace? We think these questions may serve as an indicator of self-improvement within our department. So we're really pleased to see that in the 2 years of data available, shown on this slide, that there was an improvement in score for each of these questions for our department. And we actually included the citywide average to the right to show that there was actually a larger increase in our department in positive responses than the average City of Austin employee response. And we see these 2 years as particularly critical because the 2018 to 2019 time period was when we completed the equity assessment using that tool developed by the community and began talking and organizing around racial equity at a department-wide level. So while there is still much work to do, we're proud to see that this process, again, given to us by the Equity Office and the community, is having an impact in how our staff perceive these issues as a part of our daily work. So this next slide is looking at this process and how we extend it to our relationships in the community, normalizing, organizing, operationalizing on repeat, checking back in continually to ensure we're hearing things right. So I wanted to talk about 2 things we're doing to support this. First, we've been working to expand our community engagement networks and strategies. So this includes building on existing relationships, such as the East Austin Environmental Initiative that Jorge mentioned at the beginning, and creating or building upon relationships with community-led groups like Ramesh mentioned earlier. And we're starting to expand internal resources to support this. And actually in the last 2 years, we've hired 2 new employees with a specific role of expanding community engagement in communities of color. So we have a new community engagement planner in the planning division and a community engagement specialist in the public information office. The second opportunity to inform this work with the community is the upcoming initiative to update our Watershed strategic plan. This is a plan that many of you will know as the Watershed Protection Master Plan. So I do want to note that we are in the process of updating the name of the plan to the Watershed Protection Strategic Plan and eliminating the use of master plan, acknowledging that this term brings to mind Austin's 1928 master plan, which segregated our city along racial lines and brought lasting harm to Austin's communities of color. So I won't take too much time on this, as I understand that some other members of my team, including our new community engagement planner, will be presenting this topic in more detail at your next meeting. But I would like to highlight how this effort directly ties to the city's equity initiative and our department's initiative. So one of the main drivers of this comprehensive update is to embed equity as a central principle in how we as a department do our work and how we measure the success and impact of our work and how we engage with the community to do that work. So this will be an opportunity for us to talk both with the community and internally as a department about the themes identified in our equity assessment so we can change how we do our business, ensuring equity is at the core. So I know we're towards the end of our time, but I did want to give a quick overview of those 4 themes identified in our assessment, as they're really guiding the discussions that we're having internally and will be a key part of the conversations that we hope to have as part of the strategic plan. And so as Janna mentioned earlier, the 4 themes from our assessment were internal equity, which we've talked about tonight, and then data, prioritization, and engagement. So what do those mean? For data, as we're working towards that definition of racial equity, where race is not a predictor of your quality of life outcomes, when we look at the data, do we find that people of color are more likely to experience negative quality of life outcomes related to our department's work, such as flooding, erosion, or exposure to water pollution? And so as part of this question, we want to evaluate how we're collecting our data to ensure it is truly representative, we're identifying our blind spots, and ensuring that we're telling the full story. The next theme is prioritization. And this is looking at how can we incorporate racial equity into our decisions about how, when, and where we do our projects or our work. And the final theme is community engagement. So looking at how and when we engage with and empower the community we serve as we do our business. Through the strategic plan update process, our department will be implementing new ways to connect with community members and build relationship, seeking to ensure that we're reflecting the values and priorities of our entire community. So listening, learning, and repeating. So with that, I'll say on behalf of the team, thank you so much for your time and the opportunity to present tonight. We'd be very happy to answer any questions that you may have.